All right, strap in, everyone. Today we are going deep on Web3 and smart contracts. It's one of those topics, it seems like it's everywhere, but honestly, it can be kind of tough to get your head around. We were looking at this chat conversation the other day, and someone was asking about Web3 and smart contracts, and their questions were so on point, like the things I would want to know.
Oh,
So we thought, why not make that our deep dive today?
yeah.
Like really cut through all the noise and figure out what Web3 and smart contracts even are and, how they work. Why should anyone care?
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. Starting with real questions, how people actually learn, that helps us get to what everyone's probably thinking, but to,
Hmm.
maybe a little intimidated to ask.
Right. Okay, so right away, the chat was all about defining Web3. They were saying it's like this decentralized internet where big companies don't have all the power, users do. And this is all done through something called smart contracts, which honestly already sounds kind of complicated.
Well, yeah, a lot of times Web3 is presented as this perfect future, but the details are where it gets, where it gets interesting.
For sure. So then the chat went on to list five key things about Web3: decentralization, blockchain, smart contracts,
Yeah.
tokenization, and user ownership. That's a lot to keep track of.
Well, break it all down. Think of them as building blocks, right? And actually, even your confusion is a great example of why Web3 matters. Like right now, you're relying on us to explain this stuff. We're acting like the central authority, the source of truth. Web3 wants to change that.
So instead of trusting Google or Wikipedia, I should trust what? Math algorithms?
Kind of, yeah. So blockchain is this tech behind Web3. And it lets us spread out that trust, and not just have it in a few big companies. It's like, imagine this huge shared ledger that everyone can see and check.
Okay, I'm kind of seeing how that connects to the whole decentralization thing. But what about tokenization? Sounds like, I don't know, a sci-fi movie or something.
It sounds futuristic, but it's already happening in some ways. Imagine a concert ticket, right? Tokenization could make that ticket this, like one-of-a-kind digital thing, stored on the blockchain, proves you own it, make sure no one can fake it.
So no more scalpers with bogus tickets outside the shop.
Exactly. And it goes way beyond tickets, too. Digital art, collectibles, even real estate and voting rights.
Whoa, okay. So we've got decentralization, blockchain, tokenization, all part of this Web3 thing. But the chat kept coming back to these smart contracts. They said it was a self-executing program on the blockchain. I'm not sure I fully follow.
Okay, imagine a vending machine, but instead of giving you snacks, it dispenses agreements. You put in the right conditions, like payment, and boom, the smart contract does what it's supposed to, like releases the product or whatever that agreement is about. No humans needed in the middle.
So it's like a digital vending machine for agreements. That's a very cool way to think about it.
Yeah, and that's what makes them so powerful. No need for middlemen. Like lawyers or banks. Things can happen faster, cheaper, maybe even safer.
Okay, starting to click now. But then the chat asked about Python, programming languages, that kind of stuff. Do I need to be a coder to get how this works?
You don't need to be a coder, no. It's true that blockchains are based on code, but they operate differently than regular software. Think of it like this. Your computer, it speaks English, right? But a blockchain speaks a whole different language.
So even if I knew Python, wouldn't help me with a smart contract.
You'd need to learn a blockchain language, like Solidity. That's used for Ethereum, one of the big platforms. Like wanting pizza in Rome, you got to learn a little Italian.
Right, right. Makes sense. So someone writes the code for the smart contract, puts it on the blockchain, and then it just runs on its own based on the rules.
Exactly. And remember how we talked about the blockchain being decentralized? Everyone can see the code, see how it's working. That's what people mean by code is law.
Okay, but hold on. There's this question in the chat that's been bugging me. If the person who wrote the code made the contract, don't they control it? What's stopping them from cheating?
Ah, see, that's where it gets really interesting. The whole point of decentralization is to get rid of that one person in control.
So once the contract's on the blockchain, even the creator can't just mess with it.
That's the idea. It's designed to run on its own.
But wait, that seems risky, right? What if they made a mistake in the code?
Yeah, that's the other side of this whole thing. It's powerful, but it can also be, a little dangerous. And that's actually a perfect place to pick up next time. In part 2, we'll dive into what happens when smart contracts go wrong. And trust me, it gets pretty wild.
Back again. Last time we left off with this big question mark around what happens when smart contracts, don't work right. It's all code is law until there's a bug in the code, right?
You got it. And that's a huge thing people worry about with Web3. We can talk about these awesome ideas, decentralization and all that. But at the end of the day, it's humans writing this code. And humans, well, we mess up sometimes.
Totally. So let's say, worst case scenario, there's a problem in a smart contract, like an honest mistake. Or maybe the person who made it put in a sneaky backdoor, to cheat. What
Oh.
then? Does the whole blockchain just, like, explode?
It won't explode, but things can go pretty bad. Remember how we talked about immutability? How you can't change the code once it's on the blockchain?
Yeah.
Well, that becomes a problem
So
here.
even if everyone knows there's a mistake, you can't just, like, hit undo.
Nope. The bad code, it'll still run, just like it was written.
And that could mean people lose money, security gets messed up, who knows?
Yeah.
This isn't just theory, right? This has happened before.
Exactly. You're thinking about the DAO hack, right?
The one from a while back
Yeah.
where, like, millions of dollars just disappeared.
That's the one. It was a huge deal for everyone in blockchain. Really showed them, like, hey, these risks with smart contracts, they're real. In that case, the Ethereum folks, they did something pretty wild. They actually split the blockchain in two.
Wait, you could just, like, split a blockchain?
Yeah.
Like a tree growing a new branch?
It's super complicated, and people argued about it a lot. Some said, hey, you're breaking the whole point of blockchain. It's supposed to be unchangeable. But others were like, look, we gotta fix this mess.
So even in this decentralized world, sometimes humans got to step in, right? But splitting the whole thing in two, that seems extreme. Are there, like, smaller ways to deal with bad contracts?
There are, but they each have, pros and cons. One thing people do is bug bounties, where they pay hackers.
Like the good kind of hackers.
Right, ethical hackers, to find problems before bad guys can exploit them.
So it's like getting your defenses up early.
Exactly, a kind of immune system for the code. But nothing's perfect. Some bugs still get through.
What then? Just hope for the best?
Well, there's a few things. Some blockchains have what they call governance, where people who own tokens can vote.
So like a digital democracy to decide what to do?
Yeah, kind of like that.
But what if people can't agree?
That happens. Figuring out governance in Web3, it's still a work in progress. You got to balance, decentralization, making things work well, and keeping it secure.
Lots to consider. Okay, so there's bug bounties, splitting the blockchain, voting on fixes. But what about the law? Like normal law? If I lose money because of a bad smart contract, can I sue someone?
Ah, that's where it gets really tricky. The laws around this stuff, they're brand new and different everywhere you go. A lot of times it's hard to say who's responsible, since there's no one company in charge of the whole thing.
So if the code messes up, I'm kind of out of luck.
It's a valid concern, and honestly, one of the big reasons people haven't all jumped on board with Web3 yet. Some platforms are trying to figure out insurance for this kind of thing, but it's not an easy problem to solve.
This is a lot to take in, that's for sure. Smart contracts, they could be awesome, but there's definitely risks. We've talked tech stuff, the problems, and even the legal side. But what about, like, the bigger picture? How could Web3, with these smart contracts, really change our lives? Not just, tickets and digital art, but the whole thing.
That's where it gets exciting, and that's where we'll pick up next time.
Okay, final part, let's do this. So we've talked about the how of smart contracts and what happens when they go wrong. But now, zoom out for me, like big picture stuff. How could this Web3 thing, powered by these contracts, actually change things? And I mean, like, real life, beyond just, I don't know, concert tickets or whatever.
That's the fun part, right? We talked about digital identity, better supply chains, faster money stuff, but it goes even deeper than that. Think about how much we rely on big companies now for everything. Our data, what we see online, even like creative work. Web3, the whole idea is to flip that around.
So instead of, like, Facebook deciding what shows up in my feed, I would have more control. That sounds pretty good, not gonna lie. But is that even possible?
It's not like a magic solution, but the tools are starting to be there. Remember we talked about user ownership being a big part of Web3? That goes with controlling your own data. Imagine having this, like, digital vault just for you. All your info, health records, school stuff, everything.
So instead of it being all over the place, a million websites, it's in one spot, and I decide who can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm into that.
Right. It's not just being organized either. It changes who has the power. Right now, companies make money off our data, and we don't even really know how. Web3 wants to give that power back to people. You could even get paid for your data.
Whoa, so I wouldn't just be the product, I could actually profit. Okay, now that's a game changer. But Got to be honest, all this decentralization, users in control, it sounds kind of, I don't know, idealistic. Are there like downsides, things we haven't thought about?
That's the key, right? Being excited about the tech, but also realistic. One big thing is, how easy is it to use? Building stuff on blockchain that normal people can understand, that's still being worked on.
Yeah, like what good is this amazing future if nobody can figure out how to log in?
Exactly. Another thing is it fair? Web3 could make things more equal, but it could also make existing problems worse. Like, what about people who don't have good internet or don't know much about tech? Do they get left behind?
So just because the tech allows for good things doesn't mean it'll automatically happen. We got to make sure it does.
For sure. And then there's the environment. Can't talk about Web3 without talking about how much energy some blockchains use. The good news is there are ways to make it more sustainable. Like, proof of stake uses way less power.
So it's not like all good or all bad. There are options.
Yeah, totally. As things improve, people are paying more attention to making it eco-friendly.
Okay, so we've got ease of use, fairness, and the environmental impact. But what about the deep questions? We keep saying code is law, but is that how we want things to work? What about human judgment, being responsible for your actions?
Those are the questions we have to ask. Web3 makes us rethink everything. How we govern, laws, even what's true. In a world without one person in charge, who gets to decide what's right? How do you settle arguments when there's no, ultimate authority?
It's like we're exploring a whole new world, right? Exciting, but kind of scary, too.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting. Web3 isn't some finished thing, it's constantly changing. It's up to us to shape it, make it match what we believe in, build the future we want.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the tiny details of smart contracts to this huge potential for changing how the whole world works. But it's clear this is just the start of the conversation. Thanks for coming along on this deep dive with us, and keep thinking about this stuff.
My pleasure. And remember, the future of Web3, it's not just lines of code. It's being created by all of us as we learn, try things out, and really engage with this tech. Stay curious out there.